The void of the Helios sector was not truly empty. It was filled with the faint, sad light of dying stars and the cold, hard evidence of a lost war. The United Systems fleet was a broken thing, a collection of mismatched ships crawling through the darkness. They were bruised and bleeding, their once proud formations now scattered like leaves in a storm dot. At the heart of this retreat was the flagship, the Celestial Resolve. It was an Elosian vessel, designed with graceful, sweeping curves that were now scarred black by plasma burns. Its main hangar bay was a gaping, ragged hole. Thin streams of frozen coolant and air traced glittering paths from smaller wounds along its hull. Inside, the lights were dim, set to a harsh emergency blue. The smell of burnt wiring and fear hung in the recycled air. Commander Sue Hyan stood on the command platform, her hands resting lightly on the cool, chipped surface of the railing. She was not old by Elosian standards, but the last 3 solar cycles had carved deep lines of fatigue around her eyes. Her uniform, once a crisp gray, was stained and worn. She watched the main viewer, which showed a schematic of their pathetic fleet. 5 capital ships remained from the original 20. 12 escort vessels, down from 50. Countless dots representing life pods drifted behind them, a silent testament to their losses. Status tactical, she said, her voice low but clear in the quiet hum of the bridge. A man at the console to her left. Hyan did not look up from his screens. His face was pale under the blue light. No change, Commander. Drive systems are at 40% efficiency on the Resolve. The Evening Star is reporting major hull stress. They cannot jump again. Energy reserves across the fleet are at 19% and falling. Defensive shields are nominal but weak. Most defensive weapon systems are offline or depleted. Sue Hyan closed her eyes for a brief second. 19%. They could not fight. They could barely run. And the swarm? Hyan's shoulders tightened. He tapped a command, and the viewer shifted. At the very edge of the sensor range, a cloud of geometric symbols appeared. They moved with a terrible, perfect synchronicity. Dozens of angular, obsidian ships, cold and silent. They emitted no heat, no communication signals, only the faint, chilling energy signature of their gravitic drives. They have matched our vector, Hyan reported. They are accelerating. Intercept in 47 standard units. Less than an hour. Sue Hyan felt the weight of every soul in the fleet pressed down on her. Millions of beings, families, scientists, soldiers, all who had looked to her for leadership. She had led them into battle after battle against the mechanoid swarm, a relentless enemy of pure, cold logic that sought only to convert all matter into more of itself. And she had led them to this edge of defeat. The human system? She asked, though she knew the answer. Lysithia. It is the closest. Their border beacon is active and acknowledges our transit request. It offers sanctuary. Hyan finally looked up, his expression bleak. But there is no military data, Commander. No patrol patterns. No defensive grid specifications. Their treaties promise aid, but their actual capabilities are unknown, classified, or perhaps just not understood. That was the great gamble. Humanity had joined the galactic community only a few cycles ago. They were quiet, polite, and deeply secretive. They traded knowledge for resources, spoke of peace, but offered no details of their strength. To the United Systems, drowning in the swarm's endless metallic tide, humanity was a mystery. A last, desperate hope built on rumors and vague diplomatic promises that an alert chimed softly on Hyan's console. He looked down and his breath caught. The swarm, they're initiating an attack pattern. Precursors detected. They're preparing their energy lances. On the viewer, the cloud of symbols began to shift. Tendrils of ships broke away from the main body, moving to flank their slow-moving fleet. It was a classic swarm maneuver, designed to cut off escape and destroy from all sides. A cold knot formed in Su-Hyan's stomach. "Bring the fleet to defensive posture Delta," she ordered, her voice hardening. "All power to rear shields. Concentrate the escorts around the Evening Star. They are the most vulnerable." Across the bridge, crew members moved with a quiet urgency. There was no panic. They had done this too many times. The communications officer, a young woman named Misha, turned in her seat. "Commander, we are being hailed by the swarm command node. Audio only, standard frequency." A hush fell over the bridge. The swarm never spoke. It analyzed, calculated, and consumed. A hail was unprecedented. Su-Hyan straightened her back. "Put it through." The sound that filled the bridge was not a voice. It was a digital cascade, a stream of pure data translated into a harsh, synthetic tone. It spoke in the common galactic trade language, but the words were devoid of any feeling. "United Systems Fleet, your operational capacity is calculated at 18.7%. Your probability of successful evasion is 0.01%. Your biological components are inefficient. Surrender for integration. Resistance is illogical. You will be made optimal." The message ended. The silence that followed was thicker than before. The offer was not for life, but for a fate worse than death, to be broken down. Your mind and body scanned and dissolved. Your ship's atoms repurposed for the swarm's endless expansion. Su-Hyan looked at the faces of her crew. She saw the fear, but she also saw weary defiance. Hyan met her gaze and gave a single, sharp nod. Micha's hands were clenched, but steady on her console. She turned back to the viewer, to the approaching cloud of death. "Misha," she said, her voice now carrying the full, formal tone of command. "Open a channel on the emergency band. All frequencies. Directed to the human authorities in the Lysithia system." Micha worked quickly. "Channel open, Commander." Su-Hyan took a deep breath, facing the void where she hoped someone was listening. "This is Commander Su-Hyan of the United Systems flagship Celestial Resolve. We are a civilian and military refugee fleet under the protection of the United Systems Charter. We are pursued by a mechanoid swarm annihilation force. We request immediate sanctuary and defensive assistance under the terms of the Helios Mutual Aid Treaty. We are declaring a state of existential emergency." She paused, the words feeling too small against the vast, uncaring enemy. She leaned slightly toward the mic, letting some of her own fatigue and iron will seep into her tone. "We cannot hold. If your promises of aid have meaning, you must act now, or witness our end." She cut the channel with a gesture. No one spoke. The only sounds were the beeps of consoles and the low thrum of the struggling engines. On the viewer, the swarm's flanking tendrils were almost in position. The lead elements of their main force began to glow with a sickly purple light as their powerful lances charged. "Time to intercept?" Su-Hyan asked, her eyes fixed on the glowing symbols. 23 units, Hyan whispered. They waited. The seconds stretched into a lifetime. The human system, Lysithia, was a faint star on the distant edge of the viewer. It gave no sign. No welcoming fleet. No bolstering signal. Nothing. The first act of the battle began without them. A spear of violet energy, brighter than a star, lanced out from the lead swarm vessel. It crossed the distance in an instant and struck the rearmost alien cruiser, a ship called the Vigilant Dawn. The Dawn's weakened shields flared white and died. The beam carved through its engine housing. A silent, blooming fireball erupted into the vacuum, briefly illuminating the scarred hulls of the fleeing fleet. Then it was gone, leaving only twisted metal and spreading debris. It had begun. The final, hopeless fight. Su-Hyun gripped the railing, her knuckles white. She prepared to give the order to turn, to make a final, futile stand so that perhaps a few life pods might slip away. And then space itself rippled. The violet afterimage of the vigilant dawns. Death still burned on the retinas of everyone on the bridge of the celestial resolve. The silence was no longer tense. It was hollow, a prelude to the end. Commander Su-Hyun's mouth was dry. The order to turn and fight was on her lips, a final gesture of defiance. But before the words could form, the ripple began. It was not like the violent, jagged tear of a swarm jump. That was a wound in space, a brutal shove into a higher dimension. This was different. At the edge of the battlefield, between the dying alien fleet and the advancing swarm, space began to shimmer. It wavered like heat haze over a desert. But deep in the void, a low, subsonic thrum vibrated through the hull of the Resolve, a physical sensation felt in the bones and teeth of every crew member. What is that? Dae-Hyun breathed, his fingers flying over the tactical console. Massive spatial distortion. Origin point. It's right in the swarm's advance path. Energy signature is unfamiliar. No, it's almost absent. It's all potential energy, like a coiled spring. The swarm's perfect advance faltered. The geometric cloud of ships, which had been moving with clockwork precision, seemed to stutter. Their charging energy lances dimmed and powered down completely. The alien fleet held its breath. The shimmer intensified, condensing into a specific, defined point. Then, with a final deep pulse that they felt more than heard, the reality of that point simply changed. It emerged, not flying out at speed, not decloaking in a flash of light. It was just suddenly there, as if it had always been present, and they were only now permitted to see it. The human warship. A collective, silent gasp seemed to sweep through the bridge of the celestial resolve. Su-Hyun felt her heart do a strange, slow thump in her chest. This was not what she had imagined. In her mind's eye, she had pictured something sleek, perhaps, or covered in powerful-looking emitter arrays. She had pictured something that spoke of advanced technology. This spoke of something else entirely. It was a colossal, angular slab of darkness. Its shape was brutally simple. A long central spine with blocky, asymmetrical protrusions that looked less like weapon pods and more like structural fortifications. There were no graceful curves, no artistic flourishes. Every line was sharp, every corner exact. The material was a perfect, non-reflective black, a black so deep it seemed to drink the light from the stars around it. No running lights traced its hull. No engine glows pulsed from its rear. It possessed a terrifying stillness. It was also immense. It dwarfed the largest swarm command node, making the deadly alien vessel look like a child's toy. It simply hung in the vacuum, silent and motionless, positioned sideways to both the fleeing aliens and the swarm, presenting its broad, dark flank. Size estimate, Su-Hyun managed to say, her voice a whisper. Dae-Hyun was shaking his head, his instruments reflecting meaningless static on his face. I can't get a clear lock. Passive scans are. They're not being reflected. They're being absorbed. Active scans bounce back with no data. It's like a shadow. A hole, best guess. At least 15 kilometers from stem to stern. 15 kilometers. The number hung in the air. Their flagship was barely 2. No power readings? No shields? Weapons? Asked engineer Ji Woo from her station. Her voice was full of a technician's frustrated curiosity battling with sheer awe. Nothing, Dae-Hyun confirmed. If I didn't see it with my own eyes on the optical feed, I would swear there was nothing there. It's inert. A ghost. But it was no ghost. On the featureless black plane of its forward-facing section, there was a single mark. Stenciled in plain, stark white human script was an identifier, BTS-101, and below it, in smaller letters, a name, Korea. Korea, Su-Hyan repeated softly. A name, not a number. A place that the swarm had recovered from its pause. Their logic engines had processed the new variable. The ship emitted no energy, raised no shields, moved not at all. To their flawless, predatory logic, two conclusions were possible. It was a non-functional hulk, a piece of cosmic debris, or it was attempting a primitive bluff. Neither warranted a change in their primary objective, the consumption of the biological fleet. New command signal flashed through the swarm. The flanking tendrils of ships adjusted their course, now curving to encircle both the alien fleet and the strange, dark monolith. The central mass of the swarm fleet began moving forward again, their energy lances reigniting with that sickly purple glow. "They're ignoring it," Micha said from communications, her voice tight with dismay. "They're going to attack us right past it." The hope that had flickered for a moment in Su-Hyan's chest guttered. The human ship was just a silent witness. It would watch them die, and then perhaps the swarm would turn their attention to studying this strange, dark artifact. The lead swarm vessel, a sharp-angled spear of a ship, reached what should have been its optimal firing range against the celestial resolve. It began to orient itself, but its trajectory took it across the bow of the human ship. The Korea dot had happened in an instant. The Korea did not turn. It did not activate a shield with a flash of energy. There was no warning hum of charging weapons. On its dark surface, a single hexagonal panel, perhaps a kilometer wide, slid open with a silent, smooth motion. The cavity beneath was pitch black. From that blackness, something moved. It was not a bright energy bolt. It was a physical object, a shape of darkened metal, launched so fast it was barely a blur dot, crossed the distance between the Korea and the lead swarm ship in less than a heartbeat. There was no impact flare, no explosive detonation. The swarm ship, a vessel capable of gutting a United Systems cruiser, simply came apart. It disintegrated into a perfectly expanding, spherical cloud of fine gray dust, as if every bond holding its atoms together had been simultaneously severed. The dust cloud sparkled silently for a moment in the light of the distant star, then began to drift. The sound that escaped Daehyun's lips was not a word. It was a choked exhale of pure shock. The Korea had not moved. The hexagonal panel had already closed, seamless once more. It was again just a silent, dark slab. The entire swarm armada stopped dead. Not a maneuver, not a tactical pause. A full, system-wide halt. Every ship, from the largest command node to the smallest interceptor, ceased all forward momentum. The purple glow of their weapons died again, this time completely. On the bridge of the celestial resolve, the only sound was the quiet hum of life support. Su-Hyan realized she had not blinked in a full minute. Her eyes were fixed on the viewer, on the impossible dark shape and the glittering dust that was all that remained of a swarm warship. The human vessel had not defended the aliens. It had not even directly intervened in the battle. It had merely asserted a boundary, a line in the sand of space that the swarm had crossed, and the penalty for crossing had been utter, silent, and total obliteration. The message was not broadcast. It was written in metal dust and silence. And for the first time since the war began, the United Systems fleet saw something they thought impossible. The mechanoid swarm, the relentless, unfeeling devourer of worlds, was afraid. The silence that followed was deeper than the vacuum outside. It was a silence of pure shock, thick enough to feel. On the bridge of the celestial resolve, no one moved. They all stared at the main viewer, where two impossible scenes played out side by side. On one side, the glittering, expanding dust cloud that had been a swarm warship. On the other, the silent, dark slab of the human vessel, the Korea. It looked exactly as it had moments before, as if it had done nothing more significant than blink. Dae-Hyan was the first to break the spell. His training kicked in. His hands, trembling slightly, flew back to his tactical console. "Rerunning sensor logs," he muttered, his voice hoarse. "The projectile. No energy signature. No plasma trail. Pure kinetics. The velocity." He trailed off, running the calculations again. His face went paler. It was moving at a significant fraction of light speed. The kinetic energy delivered. It's theoretical. It shouldn't be possible to launch a mass that dense at that speed without. I don't know. It just shouldn't be possible. Engineer Ji Woo leaned over her own station, her brow furrowed. It didn't overpower their shields. Their shields didn't even react. It was like the projectile. Ignored them. Passed right through the energy barrier, as if it weren't there, and applied force directly to the hull material. But the hull didn't crumple or explode, Dae-Hyan countered, pulling up the frozen image. It disintegrated, atomized. That's not kinetic force. That's something else. The method doesn't matter, Commander Soo-Hyan said, finding her voice. It sounded strange to her own ears. Calm, analytical. She was compartmentalizing the awe and terror, locking it away so she could function. The result does. What is the swarm doing? The swarm fleet was not advancing, but it was not retreating either. The geometric cloud of obsidian ships hung in space, motionless. On the scanners, a furious storm of data traffic could be detected zipping between the swarm vessels. They were communicating at a bandwidth and speed that would melt an alien comms array. They were analyzing, recalculating. They are reassessing, Dae-Hyan said. The new variable. It does not compute. They are running every possible simulation. Micha at the comms station straightened up. Commander, we are receiving a transmission. From the human ship. Tight beam. Text only. Put it on my screen, Soo-Hyan ordered. The words appeared on her private command display, in clear. Simple galactic common script. United Systems Fleet Celestial Resolve. Maintain current. Position. Do not initiate hostile action. Stand by. That was all. No greeting. No identification. No explanation of intent. Just an order. Should we reply? Micha asked. Datsu-Hyan considered for a moment. The human ship had just destroyed a swarm vessel with contemptuous ease. It had not yet spoken to the swarm. Its first and only communication was to tell them to stay still. Acknowledge receipt. No other reply. While the aliens tried to understand, the swarm reached a logical conclusion. Their primary directive was consumption and efficiency. The new object had demonstrated destructive capacity, but only when directly approached. Hypothesis. It was a stationary defense platform, powerful but limited in scope. Secondary hypothesis. Its single demonstration was a maximum output, leaving it vulnerable. The logical test. A coordinated, swift attack from multiple vectors. Without a sound, a wing of 12 swarm interceptors broke formation. They were fast, jagged things, like thrown knives. They accelerated not towards the alien fleet, but directly for the Korea, splitting into 3 groups to attack from different angles. Their weapons, rapid-fire plasma bolts, designed to shred shields and armor, began to glow. Swarm interceptors on attack run. Target is the human vessel, Dae-Hyan announced, tension back in his voice. Soo-Hyan gripped the railing again. This was the test. Would the human ship defend itself against a true assault? Or would it prove to be a fragile giant? The Korea did not turn. It did not try to face its attackers. It seemed to pay them no mind at all. Then, As the interceptors closed into what should have been their own optimal firing range, the human ship acted. Across its dark surface, dozens of those same hexagonal panels slid open. Not just one, dozens. They dotted the hull in a seemingly random pattern. From each black cavity, a single dark shape was ejected with that same terrifying, silent speed. Each projectile found an interceptor. Each interceptor vanished into a small, perfect puff of metallic dust. 12 attackers. 12 bursts of glitter. 12 empty spots in space. The entire engagement took less than 3 seconds. The Korea's panels closed. It remained motionless, sideways to the swarm armada. The storm of data traffic within the swarm fleet became a hurricane. But this time, their physical formation reacted. The entire cloud of ships began to pull back, not in a retreat, but in a widening of the perimeter, putting more distance between themselves and the dark human ship. "They're scared," Ji Woo whispered, and the word felt both blasphemous and true. The unfeeling swarm was acting on something that looked like fear, but the swarm's logic was not done. A new analysis. The object used precise, powerful kinetic weapons against fast, small targets. Conclusion: it is a point defense system of extreme capability. Solution: overwhelm point defense with a single massive armored target. A capital ship, a command node, thick-hulled and heavily shielded, would approach at a slower speed, drawing fire and allowing analysis of the weapon system. Once its defenses were understood, it could be neutralized. One of the largest swarm vessels, a blocky, brutalist structure the aliens called a breaker, began to move. It pushed forward from the center of the cloud, its own energy lances powering up, this time aimed squarely at the Korea. It was a declaration. A test of strength against strength. The human ship, for the first time, responded differently. It did not open the hexagonal panels. Instead, along its jagged underside, a series of larger bays irised open. From them, a cloud of smaller objects spilled out into space. "More projectiles?" Daehyun asked, zooming in. "No," Suhayon said, squinting at the feed. "They're moving on their own." They were drones, but not like any drone the United Systems or the Swarm used. They were not geometric or aerodynamic. They were jagged, asymmetrical, and insectal. They had multiple limbs that ended not in tools or weapons, but in sharp, pincer-like claws. They moved with a chaotic, skittering agility that was deeply unsettling to watch, swarming forward like a cloud of angry hornets. The swarm breaker ship fired its main lance. A thick beam of violet energy, capable of cracking a planet's crust, lanced across space and struck the Korea directly on its broadside. The bridge crew of the Resolve flinched. But there was no explosion, no shield flare. The beam simply splashed. It spread over the dark hull of the human ship like water hitting a stone wall, dissipating into harmless showers of light. The Korea did not shudder. It did not react at all. The energy was absorbed or dispersed without effect. Before the swarm ship could fire again, the cloud of human drones reached it. They did not fire beams or missiles. They physically latched onto the breaker's hull, hundreds of them, clinging like metal ticks. For a second, nothing happened. Then the swarm ship began to come apart, but not violently, silently. Where each drone clung, the obsidian hull material simply vanished, eaten away in a rapidly expanding circle of nothingness. It was a process of terrifyingly fast deconstruction. The ship's own weapons, its engines, its communication spires, were silently unmade, molecule by molecule, consumed by the clinging, skittering drones. In less than a minute, the massive breaker was reduced to a hollow skeletal framework. Then the framework itself dissolved. The drones, now seeming slightly larger, detached and swarmed back toward the Korea, leaving only a faint residue of atoms behind. The bays on the underside of the human ship swallowed the returning drones. The irises closed. Once more, the Korea was just a silent, black shape against the stars. It had not moved a centimeter. It had used two completely different, equally horrifying methods to nullify two different types of threat. One was the ultimate expression of kinetic force. The other was a silent, consuming plague. On the celestial resolve, Daehyun slowly leaned back in his chair. "They don't have a battle doctrine," he said softly, to no one in particular. "They have a toolkit, and they just picked the right tool for the job." The swarm armada had seen enough. The furious data traffic stopped. In unison, every single ship turned, presenting their narrowest profiles to the Korea. Their gravitic drives flared to life, not the purple of weapons, but the dull gray of emergency flight. They were not pausing in fear anymore. They were running. The retreat of the mechanoid swarm was not a rout. It was a perfect, coordinated reversal. There was no panic in their movements, only a chillingly efficient change in priority. The geometric cloud of ships folded in on itself, each vessel aligning with mathematical precision before their gravitic drives flared a dull, uniform gray. In a silent, synchronized pulse, the entire armada vanished into the twisted pathways of their faster-than-light travel. One moment, a formidable fleet filled the space between the stars. The next, there was only an eerie emptiness, marked by the faint, dissipating gust of their destroyed comrades and the hollowed-out ghost of the breaker ship. The sudden silence on the bridge of the celestial resolve was profound. The constant, low-grade hum of fear that had been their background noise for weeks was gone, leaving a void that rang in their ears. The crew was frozen, staring at the main viewer, where the only objects of note were the dark, unmoving human warship and the glittering debris fields. Commander Soo-hyun was the first to move. She slowly unclenched her hands from the command railing, her joints stiff. "Damage report," she said, her voice sounding too loud in the quiet. It was a routine question, a lifeline back to normalcy. Daehyun blinked, shaking his head as if waking from a dream. He looked down at his console. Across the fleet? Minimal new damage. The loss of the Vigilant Dawn is confirmed. The Evening Star reports their hull stress is critical. They cannot move under their own power. Otherwise, we are intact. He said the last word with a hint of disbelief. Intact. They had faced the swarm's main pursuit force, and they were intact. Life signs in the escape pods from the Dawn? Soo-hyun asked. Mi-sha worked at the comms. Scattered, but I am reading beacons. Many beacons. Survivors. Survivors. Another word that felt foreign. Soo-hyun let out a breath she hadn't realized she was holding. The crushing weight of command, the certainty of failure, lifted just a fraction. But it was immediately replaced by a new, more complex tension. She turned her gaze back to the viewer, to the ship called Korea. The human vessel remained exactly where it was, a silent black monolith. It did not hail them. It did not move to assist the crippled Evening Star or the life pods. It simply waited. Are they scanning us? Ji-woo asked from her engineering station. Her voice hushed. Daehyun checked his passive sensors. If they are, it's completely undetectable. No energy spikes, no probing beams. Nothing. It's still just a hole in space. A minute stretched. The alien fleet drifted, engines cold, crews in a state of shocked paralysis. They were like small animals after a cataclysm, unsure if the danger was truly past. The presence of the human ship was not comforting. It was awe-inspiring, terrifying, and deeply unnerving. It had saved them, but its manner felt less like a rescue and more like a detached, clinical removal of a nuisance. Finally, Mi-sha stiffened. Incoming transmission from the human vessel. Tight beam. Text only? Display it, Su-Hyon said. The words appeared on the main viewer this time. For all to see. United Systems Fleet. Swarm force has disengaged. Sanctuary is granted. Follow. Prescribed course to Anchor Point Bravo. Coordinates. Attached. Medical and logistical support will rendezvous. At the anchor point, do not deviate from the course. Korea will provide escort. The message was devoid of any emotion. No congratulations on surviving. No, you are safe now. It was a set of instructions. Clear, concise, and utterly impersonal. A course plot appeared on Dae-Hyun's navigational screen. A gentle arc leading deeper into the human-claimed system of Lysithia. Towards a gravitational Lagrange point. They want us to follow a specific path. Dae-Hyun said. It could be a minefield corridor. Or a safe lane through a defensive network we cannot see. Ji-Woo suggested. Su-Hyon nodded. It made cold, logical sense. You did not let a battered, unknown fleet wander through your sovereign space. You shepherded them. Acknowledge the message, Miesha. Tell them we will comply and request any specific velocity protocols. The reply from the Korea was instantaneous. Comply. With attached course. Velocity constraints are programmed. Korea out, and that was it. The communication was closed. Well, Dae-Hyun said softly. They are not chatty. Su-Hyon began issuing orders, her voice finding its familiar strength. Get the course loaded fleet-wide. Priority tow for the Evening Star. Use the Granite Heart. It has the strongest grapples. Organize recovery operations for the Dawn's life pods. All ships, minimal power to engines only. No active scans. No weapons systems, not even diagnostics. I want us to look as harmless as we actually are. The fleet began to stir, moving with the slow, pained care of the deeply wounded. Tractor beams, faint and blue, reached out from the larger ships to cradle the crippled Evening Star. Small utility vessels, themselves scarred, began the slow process of gathering the life pods. It was a scene of profound relief and immense sorrow. As the alien fleet began its slow crawl along the designated course. The Korea moved. It didn't turn with a flare of thrusters. Its dark hull simply reoriented, aligning itself with the fleet's direction of travel. It then began to move backwards, maintaining its position between the aliens and the direction from which the swarm had come. Its engines, if it had any visible ones, still emitted nothing. It moved as if space itself were carrying it, smooth and silent and impossibly fast, until it matched the fleet's sluggish pace. It was an escort. But it felt like being stalked by a silent, vast predator. For the long hours that followed, the human ship was a constant, dark presence on their flank. The crews of the United Systems Fleet went about their salvage and repair, but conversations were hushed. Eyes kept drifting to the external monitors. The sheer scale of the thing, its absolute silence, bred a deep, instinctive unease. On the bridge of the Resolve, Engineer Ji-Woo finally voiced what many were thinking. She had been studying the scant data from the brief battle. They didn't fight the swarm, she said, not looking up from her screen. Dae-Hyun glanced over. What do you mean? They destroyed several vessels. That's just it, Ji-Woo replied. They didn't fight. Fighting implies an exchange, an interaction. The swarm attacked. The human ship processed the attack. It used a tool to remove a small, fast problem. It used a different tool to remove a large, armored problem. It didn't seem to exert itself. It didn't seem to have a strategy beyond absolute, overwhelming response. She finally looked up, her expression troubled. It's like we watch an insect sting a boot. The boot doesn't get angry. It doesn't devise a plan. It just steps down. That's not war. That's pest control. Her words settled over the bridge. They had been saved from annihilation, but the entity that saved them viewed the dreaded mechanoid swarm as a pest, a nuisance to be efficiently removed. Where did that leave them? The journey to Anchor Point Bravo continued in that heavy silence. The human warship, a shadow against the stars, was a constant reminder. The fear of the swarm was fading, replaced by a new, more profound awe. They were not just in a new territory. They were in the presence of a power so far beyond their understanding that it redefined the very meaning of strength. And as the designated coordinates grew near, the question on everyone's mind was no longer, are we safe? It was, what have we been saved by? Anchor Point Bravo was not a planet or a station. It was a place of calm, a stable point in the dance of gravity between the system star and a silent, gray gas giant. The United Systems fleet drifted into this quiet arena, their ships trailing scars and exhaustion like smoke. The human warship Korea had peeled away moments before, sliding silently into the deeper darkness, becoming just another shadow among many. Its departure was as unceremonious as its arrival. In its place, new ships arrived. They were nothing like the Korea. They were sleek and white, marked with simple blue symbols across and a gear. They moved with gentle, precise efficiency. One, a large vessel with wide, open hangar bays, positioned itself beside the crippled evening star. Gangways extended, not with clanging metal, but with a soft, airtight seal. Another, smaller and swifter, began to flit between the recovered life pods, tractoring them gently into its hold. A text-only message arrived for the celestial resolve from a ship called Hippocrates. Prepare for medical and technical assistance. Please open airlock Delta for triage teams. We have compatible atmosphere and medical supplies. Commander Su Hyan gave the order. She watched on the external monitor as the human personnel emerged. They wore simple white environmental suits, without visible armor or weapons. Their movements were calm, purposeful. They did not gawk at the battle damage or the alien nature of the ships. They simply went to work. In the hours that followed, the efficiency was breathtaking. Human medical teams moved through the wounded sections of the Resolve, their equipment small and quiet. They treated erosion burns and talaxian pressure fractures with the same detached competence. They asked few questions, offered no comforting words, but their actions were swift and effective. The pain of the wounded began to recede. At the same time, engineering teams in white suits with tool belts assessed the evening star. They didn't bring massive replacement parts. Instead, they applied small gray patches to the worst hull fractures. The material flowed like liquid metal, then hardened, sealing the tears with a strength that made the original hull plating look like paper. They rerouted systems with a speed that made engineer Ji Woo, who was observing, feel like a child playing with blocks. Su Hyan stood on her now quiet bridge. The alarms were silent. The tactical screens were dark. The only sound was the low hum of systems being gently repaired. The immediate crisis was over. The survivors were being saved. She should have felt relief. She should have felt gratitude. Instead, she felt a hollow chill. She walked to the main viewport, looking out at the calm ballet of human support vessels. Beyond them, in the deeper dark, she could no longer see the Korea, but she knew it was there. Its presence was like a permanent change in gravity. Hyan joined her, his hands clasped behind his back. He looked tired, but his eyes were clear. The teams say the evening star will be capable of low-power thrust in 6 hours. Full repairs will take days, but they are possible. They are. They are very good. They are, Su Hyan agreed softly. They fix what they decide to fix, with the same ease with which they broke the swarm. That was the heart of it. The silence of the humans. Their terrifying warship had not roared in triumph. Their helpful support vessels did not offer congratulations. They just acted. They solved problems. The swarm was a problem to be solved. A damaged ship was a problem to be solved. Her refugee fleet was likely just another problem to be managed. What are they? Dae-Hyan asked, voicing the unspoken question that had hung in the air since the dark ship first appeared. I don't know, Su-Hyan said, but they are not like us. The swarm was a force of nature. A storm. You can understand a storm. You can predict its path, fear its power. But this? She nodded towards the stars, where the Korea had vanished. This is a choice. A deliberate, controlled application of power so absolute it becomes casual. The swarm wanted to consume us. I don't know what the humans want. A soft chime came from the comm station. Micha was gone, resting, so Su-Han walked over. It was another text message, this time from a human administrative vessel, the Logistics Coordinator. United Systems Fleet. Sanctuary processing is underway. You will be guided to a temporary settlement on Lycidia 4, a non-orbital body. It has acceptable atmospheric conditions for your species mix. Resources will be provided. A human liaison will be assigned to facilitate your needs. Further discussion regarding your long-term status will occur once immediate needs are stabilized. It was a schedule. A plan for them. Made without their input. Su-Hyan typed a reply, her fingers moving slowly. We thank you for your assistance. We request a meeting with your command authority to discuss the strategic situation regarding the swarm. We have extensive intelligence that may be of use. The reply was almost immediate. Your intelligence has been received from your ship's databases. It is being analyzed. A liaison will address your concerns in due course. Focus on recovery. They had already taken the data. Without asking. Of course they had. To them, it was just another part of the problem to be solved. Su-Hyan stepped back from the console. The galaxy had shifted on its axis. For her entire life, the great conflict had been the United Systems versus the mechanoid swarm. It was the story of their time. A brutal, existential war. Now, in the space of a few hours, that story had been rendered small. It was a local skirmish. The real power in the galaxy did not fight wars. It didn't need to. It simply imposed its will with the quiet, unquestionable finality of a law of physics. The swarm had been terrifying because it was mindless. The humans were terrifying because they were mindful, and they had looked at the devourers of worlds and found them. Simple. She thought of her crew. Young Mi-Sha, who had sent the desperate plea. Steady Dae-Hyan, who had tracked their doom. Clever Ji-Woo, trying to puzzle out the impossible. They were alive. They would have a chance to see their families again, to breathe without fear of a swarm lance tearing through the hull. That was the gift the humans had given. But it was a gift given by a giant to an insect. It was not born of compassion, but of a detached, almost bureaucratic decision. Sanctuary is granted. The future was no longer about victory or defeat against the swarm. The swarm was now a secondary concern. The future was about learning to exist in a galaxy where such quiet, dark giants walked among the stars. It was about understanding the rules of beings who wrote their intentions not in speeches or treaties, but in kinetic impacts and silent, consuming swarms. Su-Hyan turned from the viewport, from the gentle, efficient humans repairing her ship. Her people were safe. But as she looked at the weary, hopeful faces of her bridge crew beginning to relax, she felt the weight of a new, more profound responsibility. She was their commander, and she would have to lead them into this new, strange, and deeply unsettling peace.